My name is Xixing from CCTV. I'm now in one of the famous national level natural reserve here in Gaoligong Mountains in Yunnan province. With the approval of the local government, we have got the chance to come into the mountains, and I have invited Dr. Zhang Ting to give us explanations throughout today's exploration. Please say hi to everyone. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Zhang Ting. I work in the Institute of Researches on Vegetation. This time we made a long journey here. Yes, exactly. We have traveled along many rivers and we have visited many mountains, and there has been rainfall and forests. We have get everything settled and we are fully prepared. For example, we have our satellite equipment as well as the backup power, because we would like to walk you through this process of collection of seeds, and we have discovered this relatively flat terrace where we can install the direction station, and through here we can send the signals out and we can demonstrate to all of you how we can collect the seeds from the trees. Many people would be curious why we have to collect the seeds of this certain plant. Since 2012, we have been focusing on the growth of the spout fir. And for this spout fir, it has been considered as level 2 protective species at national level in order to protect this endangered species and also to better guard the safety of this plant with high economic value. We have decided to collect the seeds so that we can help the species to survive. This one, for example, has a very long history already. And in nature, it's a very good species as the forest resources. So to collect the seeds will help us to better protect the species. So this is our object. This is what we call the belt cedar. In 2012, it has reached a height of 72 meters. This is one of its group here. And we have noticed some ropes. This means that our experts and our scientific personnel could climb up the tree and they could get their work started. Maybe we can also go join them. And we can feel the soil here is rather loose and soft, because the fermentation layer is quite shallow. And this is a very big trunk as a tree, and you can imagine how much nutrient it would require on a daily basis. The diameter is almost 3 meters, so it will take up to 5 or 6 persons to surround it with our arms. You have different types of ropes. For example, the single rope and the twin rope system, different systems. For first new beginners, we will recommend the twin rope system. And if you become familiar with climbing the trees, then you can use the single rope system. How you hang up the rope on a tree. It has been quite challenging. First time we have used the equipment and a tool, and we also have a weight to one side of the equipment. And then thus we have created the very first point of support. We have used actually the slingshot. This is a repetitive process, and you need very good climbers to do that job. And now I realize that some of the collectors, they have accomplished their part of the job and they started to climb down. So we can find the seeds collected this time in this bag. We have collected some samples and also the seeds from the bowed cedar. What's your feeling traveling up there? And you can say hi first to our audience. It's been very windy today, and I can feel the branches swinging all the time. And what about your harvest at this time? I've made a great harvest. I've collected a huge quantity of that. This is like my treasure box. So let's open that bag and have a look inside. First of all, I've noticed there are some samples. So that's a very fruitful trip. Could you please show us how we can climb up the tree? First of all, it's the security belt. This is a professional protection equipment. So you'll get both of your legs through the security equipment. Because we are now working and standing at a very high altitude place, so it's no easy job for me to do any actions or moves. And I'll get my cell phone out. These are to put on my feet. Before our program, I followed a fast training program given by our professionals so that I can get used to this work as fast as possible. So again, this is the double string system or the twin rope system. And I'll attach myself to this twin rope system. Before I go up there, I'd like to repeat one information to our audience again. This time for the recording program, we have got the approval from the local governments, from the authorities, and I will just show you a quick demonstration. Try to locate yourself on the security belt. Now my whole body or my whole life is on the string. And also you have to tie up one of your feet. And both of your hands would be grabbing on only one of the ropes. And the gravity would be put on one of your feet. I've just made some moves only. But now I have some breathing problems. Maybe I can take a quick moment to take a rest. So now you can imagine what it takes for one person to get atop the trees and up high. Again, I'm about to climb down. Now I've got my feet on the ground. So this is really a difficult, a challenging process of tree climbing. Thank you very much. And there it is. And I'm about to detach all the equipment. Thank you. So we can take a break there. And just now, people told us that it has been very windy. So what are the obstacles waiting for the collectors up there on top of the trees? First of all, you have to be very familiar with the techniques. Once you are in the mid-air, your whole life is on the string. No mistake is allowed. If you are very well trained, it will still take half an hour for you to get to the crown part of the tree. And you can also feel the strong blowing wind on the top of the trees. If you are afraid of the height, then you must be very nervous atop the tree. For people collecting the samples and the seeds, they have to be able to walk on the branches. Before you take the walk up there, you have to first of all determine whether these branches are firm or not. Why can't we just collect the seeds on the ground? Because I imagine that those seeds would fall down to the ground. First of all, for the spelled cedar, their seeds are very special because for the structure of the seeds, they have two wings, and the seeds will fly away once there is the wind. So you can't expect the seeds just to fall down to the foot of the tree. And also, for the fallen seeds that you can find on the ground, then these are usually the injured seeds or the seeds carrying the diseases. And you can see that the seeds, they are hidden. It looks a little bit like the cones. When I remove the coating, and you can see both seeds inside with their wings, very tiny ones. But this one is not very well developed. Because it's rather thin, and usually we will use the scissors to check the status of development. We would like to see if it's a fully mature seed. In general, I will say that this is not the perfect seed that we expect. So what are the explanations for this underdevelopment of the seeds? There are many reasons to that, and for our collectors, when we do the sampling, we have to first of all make our decision to see whether the seeds are qualified or not. If they are fully mature, then we will take it. And in the gene bank, we have to take at least 2,500. For some of the plants, it's easier to collect 2,500 seeds of it, but for some other plants, it may be quite challenging. So we have a basic requirement, which is 500 seeds at least for one species of the plant. Because when we do the experiment and when we do the other studies, we will consume a lot of the seeds. And so you have to expand the scope of that number to reach at least 1,500 seeds for each one of the species. If we have the surplus of the seeds, then we can do the restoration of the species and also other meaningful work. In general, we can understand it's very challenging for you to do the collection of the samples. First of all, to reach this altitude, you have to walk for more than 2 hours. And then we are on a very steep slope of the mountains. At about 2 p.m. or 3 p.m., you will lose the sunshine because most of the sunshine would be blocked by the other high mountains in the nearby areas. Yes, of course. And it has been challenging for us not only to collect the seeds for the bowed cedar, but also for the other plants. Usually, you can run into all types of difficulties, like the flooding season will give us too much water, and we have to tide over the streams and the rivers in order to get from one place to another. And also, in another circumstance, we cannot use our cameras. Some other challenges brought by the animals, for example. For example, the insects. Here in the Gaoligong Mountains, we can be bitten by the insects. For example, the leech. They're everywhere here. We have to try to walk as fast as possible so we can get rid of them. What about the dry seasons? In the Gaoligong Mountain, in the raining seasons, we have a lot of leeches, and in drying seasons, we also have other insects that could be considered as dangerous or challenging or annoying. And for many plants, in order to collect the seeds, we have to get up to the crown part of the trees. For example, just now I've demonstrated the different systems of the rope to assist your climbing. And our team has been exploring ways of exploration in the recent years, and we have carried out the training programs to train our team members to do the climbing, and of course, to secure our team members, we have to demand the presence of a professional coach for climbing. Because to do scientific explorations is not an adventure, we have to put security at first place. And for the seed collection, we have to be clear about the calendar of the development of the species. We have to know all the related conditions. We have to make sure that once collected, those seeds can last as long as possible. In 2021, we've made one session of collection already, but the quantity was not satisfying. And back then, we were a little bit earlier in the calendar. So this time, we have made it later, about 2 weeks later in the month, towards the end of November, to do the collection. The tree is so high that we cannot detect our workers atop the tree at the crown part, but we have one of our colleagues up there to show with us the footages of the workers, and these workers, they are doing a very hard job in order to collect the seeds and the samples. When we collect the seeds, we will take only the globe-like parts, not with the branches. We only will take several parts of the branches as samples, but it doesn't mean that every time when we would like to take the seeds, we will take the branches with them. We will try to minimize the injuries to the tree itself. And so when we take the seed, we will only take the globe. We also have the experts to assist us in order to do the naming of the seeds and also classifications. Now I understand this is a very careful job. Apart from the collection of the seeds, we are also doing the collection of the samples. We also keep all the information on record, for example, the geographic conditions and the other plants growing with. We also do some sketches, do some photo shooting. And also DNA materials would also be important in one part of the collection because it will help us with the genetic sequencing. Previously, you've mentioned the plants to grow with. Yes, exactly. There are plants that we can see that they are growing with the bowed cedar. They are like the neighbors, close neighbors that will be growing together. Once we've calculated a little bit, we find more than 30 different species growing together with this tree. And also for the orchids, we've counted to a number of 8 species, different types of orchids. So for this only plant of the bowed cedar, it's like a garden already. It's not a single tree standing there. It's accompanied by many other species of plants, like a whole ecosystem. When you climb up there, you will not only study the cedar, the bowed cedar itself, you also study the other plants growing together. First of all, we carried out preliminary studies. For example, some of the plants, they are unique to this place, the Gaoligong Mountains. And sometimes we can even encounter some new species, the newly discovered species. For example, last year we have discovered a new species of orchids in the valley at an altitude range from 2,000 meters to 2,200 meters. We have discovered this new species. And it's also in that range of altitude that we can find the richest diversity. And also for the group of the bowed cedar, usually we consider them growing in rich soil, for example, at this kind of environment. But we have discovered that when there is the mudstone, when there is the mudslide, and there's the landslide of the mountains, when we have the bare mud on the terrace, then we can expect the growing of the bowed cedar group. Because just now we mentioned that the seeds would be traveling with the wind, and these seeds are really clever ones. They can find the suitable ground for themselves to grow up. And this time you have also started the studies of the beech trees. We have first of all identified several representative trees, and previously I've also mentioned it's very important to respect the calendar for the sample collection and seed collection. So this time, currently at this moment, we are doing the sample collection with the bowed cedar. And later on, we're about to move to another plant, which is called the rhododendron. And this kind of rhododendron can reach up to a very high level and with very big flowers. It's the high mountain or highland rhododendron. So when you do the sampling of the seeds or the sampling of the branches, etc., all these material collection is to help the survival of these plants and also to build up the gene bank and the germplasm. It's a kind of a highly efficient work for the protection of the species. And also for the seeds, because they are tiny ones, we can use very limited space to keep them because they don't take up a lot of room and space. And with a very limited container already, we can include a huge amount of information inside. And it's easy to keep. That's why we say it's highly efficient work for the protection and restoration of the species. And also, I've prepared a surprise for all of you. By our side, there's another important and precious plant by us. It's called the bamboo of Gongshan, one of the unique species here. It's level 2 protected species in China. You can only find them in the northern part of the Gaoligong Mountains. Recently in Lushui area, we have also discovered some of them. According to the evidence of molecular science, that part of the bamboos discovered in Lushui may belong to another species. So recently, we are discovering many more new species, and we are unveiling these new species. Whether it is to protect the big trees in the Gaoligong Mountains or to safeguard the ecosystem and the biodiversity, these are important work. Today, we have been very honored and happy to be able to talk to Dr. Zhang and walk you through this area in the Gaoligong Mountains. And for our audience, I'd like to share one information with you. This area is not an open area for the tourists. It's only with the permission of the local authority that you can gain access to this area because it's the natural reserve. And this time, our team could be able to come inside this area because, first of all, we are approved and then we are accompanied by the scientists. And then, because it's a natural reserve, if you come here alone without any permission, it could also be dangerous for you. So that's all for today. Thank you for staying with us. Okay, welcome back. This is one of the largest germplasm in Asia. My name is Luo Kexing. I'm from CCTV. I'm here in the gene bank of the seas, and I'm about to explore this gene bank with all of you. And I have also one of the guests with me. His name is Cai Jie. First of all, I'd like to show this plant with you. This is the magnolia. It's a wild plant protected at national level. And it's very hard for this plant to do the replication. And for the seed collection, it has also been very challenging. How you have succeeded in moving this plant here? Actually, we have made some replication of its cells to develop into the embryon. And with the embryon of the plant, we can build up the whole plant. For example, it's a kind of rapid reproduction or rapid replication of the plant. More specifically, this is called the long stamen magnolia. With the inducing of the cells, it has taken us around 4 years to start from a very small cell to this big plant. We also hope that more and more plants in the future could be reproduced and replicated in the future. It's just a new way of cloning of the plants. So actually this one has not been transplanted from the wildlife, from the nature to this indoor environment. You have taken one of the cells and then you do the inducing work to have the embryo and until today's whole plant. Previously, we mentioned that people will do the collection of the seeds where you take the cells from the seed or from any part. It's possible for us to take the cell from the seed or from other parts of the plant as long as it's alive. And for the species, their genetic materials could come from the male parent and also the female parents. As long as it's the living material, it belongs to the range of germplasm. It can be some living seedlings, it can be living branches, it can also be in the form of the seeds. And also, the male parents and the female parents could also be included into the germplasm. But because ordinary people, they are more familiar with the seeds, so I would just talk about the seeds in general today. This is like the reception hall. There's a colleague here. He's doing the identification of the samples. For each part of the sample collection, we have to do the identification work so that in the future, we can still remember what is that. We will do the compression, and then we will attach the tickets. There's a label. We will put like the ID number there. There's a number belonging to each one of the samples. So this number is unique. This is a whole complicated system. For example, here is about 20 units of the samples, and you have a huge amount of them awaiting there in the green boxes. In general, we have to accomplish this identification work outdoor. But because for this batch of them, they have just been collected yesterday in the field, so we can quickly identify all of them here. And when you say seeds, immediately I will think about the sesame and also the peanuts. And we have many more of them, different types of fruit or the seeds in diversified forms, shapes, colors, and also sizes. This is one type of the fruit. Inside there are also seeds. Here we have diversification of the seeds. For example, this is the biggest seed. But this one is a dead one. When it's still alive, it can reach up to 20 kilograms. And this one is super tiny seed. It's a kind of orchid seed. There are many samples inside many units of the seed here. People have even calculated with only 1 gram of orchid seeds, you can find actually tens of thousands units of them. Is it easy for the orchids to survive because they can produce a lot of seeds? Yes, when you have many seeds, chances are greater for you to get the seeds surviving. When we do the collection of the seeds, we first of all do the identification, and then we do the cleansing work. We also do some estimation to see how many seeds do we have in number. We have a unique method to have an estimation. Just now, you've demonstrated the super tiny seeds of the orchids. In order to know the exact number of the units, you have to use specific scale, right? Yes, we have those equipments that can be very precise in the calculation, but you don't have to be really 100% precise. Sometimes you can just do some estimation to know the round number. And we also have to follow the procedure of the management, a flow chart of the wild plant for the seed processing. For example, right on the field in the Gaoligong Mountains, people there are doing the collection, and then there's the checking. During the checking, we give the ID card or the ID number to the seed. And we will see at this stage, where do these seeds come from? What is the status? And we will get them registered. And with the registration, they got their ID number. And then it's the drying, the cleaning, X-ray analysis, counting, main drying, and packaging, banking, etc. There are many steps here, but on the backstage of each one of these steps, you can imagine endless work until the final destination, the experiment and also analysis. So if you count all the tiny steps, it can reach up to the number of 70 or 70 plus. For every step, we have to be clear and precise. These are the photos of the seeds. For example, this is the photo of the tiny seed of the orchids. 3 different types of orchids here. They all come from the orchid family. So what is the scale? It's about 100 times larger than the real object. This one looks like the papaya. But with the real object, it's only 1 mm large. It comes from a vegetation that is similar to the cabbage. However, this is one plant growing at very high altitude in the Himalayan area. One of our colleagues have collected the samples in the Gaoligong Mountain, and also the X-ray imaging of these seeds. And you can see that they are very round seeds, and they are fully developed ones. And for the photos over there, they are taken in this way. And what are these seeds? It comes from a kind of rhododendron, the high tree rhododendron. Usually you can find them in Myanmar and in the border areas. And these are actually the wings of the seeds. So with the wings, the seeds could be able to travel with the wind. For different types of rhododendron, their seeds will have this kind of wings because these plants of rhododendron, they grow at high altitude. Usually they are windy weather. If the seeds have the wings, it's easier for them to travel around and to spread to a further space. And these are also tiny seeds. This is a kind of jujubes from Xinjiang Autonomous Region. And on its coating, and you can see all these sticky materials. When there's the wind, they can roll, and when animals pass by, these seeds would be attaching to the furs of the animals. So the seeds can choose to use different ways to spread themselves with the wind, with the animals, etc. And when seeds arrive, we will do registration work. For example, we put down the basic information, we do the evaluation of the quality of the seeds, and we do an estimation of the approximate quantity of the seeds. And previously, we have found some samples. Some of the samples, they are sent here, and we will do a quick check, and then we will get them stored. It's like a big gene bank. After the stockage of the seeds, we have to classify the information related and register the information into the digital system. And when we do the storage of the seeds, we have to make sure that they stay alive. And we will do a germination test. If it can it can germinate, if there's the germination of the seeds, it's a proof that it's alive. It sounds like a very easy experiment. However, you have to put the seed samples on a piece of paper, put them in a row. And we have many seeds here. All these ones are registered. Some of these can be shared with the gardens, or some others can go to the researchers. For example, here some samples are from Gaoligong Mountains. And this is a kind of plant from the Tibetan areas. This specific tree can only be found in the Tibet Autonomous Region and also neighboring areas. For some other species, we will also do some cultivation. For example, in our Institute of Researchers, we have this program of studies. With this one, we do the cultivation. Later on, we will test the microbes. There are follow-up programs. In general, these seeds can help us to set the foundation for the upcoming programs. If we have the seeds, then we have the precondition to start everything else. And you would also be retrieving information from the seeds and the other samples. Germination is only one of the basics. We have many seas here. When we keep the seeds, it's like we have the hope in stockage. And with the germination of the seeds, we can also make new progress. Some seeds, they are easier to germinate. And for other seeds, they require higher standards and more favorable environments, some extra conditions. For example, here, we will add up some sunshine, some lighting conditions. And here, for the ambient temperature is always around 20 degrees Celsius, or between 15 to 20 degrees Celsius. We will first put these seeds in this environment to see whether they can accomplish the germination. If the answer is negative, then we will try other ways. For example, here, our colleagues, they are doing some extra work. They have to do some treatment on the seeds. For some bean-like seeds, they have to slide open the coating of the seed so the water can go inside into the interior of the seeds. With the water, it can accelerate the germination process. Because for some types of the seeds, once it's dried up, then the coating would block all the humidity. Once I've read in the document that the coating could help to separate the exterior humidity with the inner parts. The coating is protective. Sometimes you will see the bean-like seeds, they are eaten by the insects. But in some circumstances, with the bites of the insects, it can help to accelerate the process of germination. Because with the biting of the insects, it's like we have a crack on the surface of the coating. It can let inside air and also the humidity. Some of the plants, they have much fewer quantity of the seeds, but some others no. Some others, they will have countless seeds. And the seeds can always give us many surprises. And we think that the seeds, they are very clever. We also have this incubator-like facilities to simulate the conditions of growth for the seeds. For example, in nature, some of the trees, they grow in an area with significant changes of temperature during the day, from day to night. So here, to accelerate or to help up a little bit with the germination, we can use this incubator to simulate that significant change of temperature throughout the day. Today, for the technologies, we still have to make some progress. For example, currently with the available technologies, we cannot restore some of the species with limited materials, but maybe in the future, with more advancements of the technology, we can bring many lost species back to our world. And for this space is the treatment chamber of the seas. After the registration, we will do the drying up of the seeds. you have two gates here. For example, here is the chamber for preliminary drying. Here the ambient temperature is 15 degrees Celsius and the relative humidity is 15 degrees. So when you work here for some moments, you will feel it's very dry. It's like you have taken a long flight. And the northern part of China in the winter season is also very dry. The relative humidity degree in air is also very low. Sometimes it's around 10, 15, etc. But the seas like it. In this kind of environment, their vitality could be very well kept. These are different types of seas, and they are safe here. They feel very comfortable and very dry and cold. For the treatment of the seas later, I will show you more details. It's a very long process. What I'm doing here is registration work. How many species do we have and how many copies do we have? When we come into the space, because we are now in Yunnan province, I can immediately feel the perfume of the mushrooms. Do you have the seeds of the wild mushrooms? Actually, the mushrooms don't have the seeds. But they have the spores. Where do you keep the genetic materials of the spores? It's a totally different system because it's very complicated. So just now we have visited the preliminary drying chamber for the seeds. We put the seeds inside in order to cool them down. And after that step is the cleaning of the seeds. For example, these are relatively big seeds, and we have to remove unwanted objects. We do it by hand. For every grain of that, we remove the unwanted objects. Because we are taking care of the seeds from the wild world, usually the seeds would come in different shapes and different sizes. For this kind of plants, when we do the sample collection, we will take a part like that. But this is a seed. This is the seed. It's as small as a grain of sesame. These are the exposed seeds, and then we have to make some selections to pick the good ones out. What is the criteria for the selection? First of all, we remove everything that we don't want. For example, here you can see clearly what are the seeds and what are the unwanted objects. And you can only do it with your hand to separate the two different materials. And previously, I've noticed there are fluffy seeds. I even would like to try it myself, but this one is much more challenging. And you can do the separation with your hand, and there are also some equipments. For example, you have the filter here. Do you have to follow a certain order or you just use different tools according to different types of the seeds? First, you do the registration and then the preliminary drying. And these are the dry seeds. Sometimes we can also find some wet seeds. Then there are other procedures. For example, you do the washing in order to get the seeds out. I've also noticed a card for registration. For example, what kind of method you've applied for the cleaning and the duration of the cleaning. You have to put it on the record. And finally, this information will also be registered into the system. How much time does it take to finish this batch? After a certain time, they will put the selected ones under the microscope. One side is the seed, and one other side is unwanted matter. You have to use this tool. I would like to have a try myself. You've made it easier for me. These are skilled workers here, because now here in the gene bank we have already included more than 100,000 units. And it's all thanks to the efforts of these people. How many types of species or how many types of seeds have you dealt with? About 20,000. This is one batch, and I've already cleaned 20,000 batches. Every day you have to sit in front of your desk and be really focused. They would like to keep all the qualified seeds with the bank. Everything that could be used should be kept, because they understand how challenging and difficult it has been for the collectors in the field. And this is a machine. Inside, we have the wind power to separate the seeds from the unwanted material, because they are different in gravity, in weight. So you have two boxes here. They have different weight, so the heavier one would fall into one of the boxes, and the lighter one would go to the other. After the cleaning, we will use the microscope as one of the ways to test the purity of the selected seeds. And then we will also use the X-ray to do the imaging of the seeds. Some of the seeds, at first look, we think is a good one, but after the X-ray imaging, we could find many problems. For example, for this batch of seeds, if we just look at them with our eyes, we think all of them are good ones. But with the X-ray, we can find some of the seeds, they have the void inside. Maybe it's because they are not very well developed, or their interior has been eaten up by the insects. So from that imaging, you can tell that 40% of the seeds are empty ones, are empty seeds. Then we will keep this information in the database, and the computer would do the calculation. And we can see in the whole batch of the seeds how many are good ones. Because at this stage we cannot do any further cleaning, so we will just keep all the seeds together, including the empty ones. And later on, if we do the germination, because we know how many seeds they are empty in the first place, so we can do the calculation. If the void rate is too high, then we have to do the whole process from zero once again. For the standard collection of the seeds, you have to take at least 2,500 seeds at once. But for some other interesting species, we can also take some seeds. But the ideal scenario would be 10,000 seeds, because we can do the test, and we can also consider to do the replication of the individuals. Just now we have visited the room for X-ray imaging, and here is to take the ID photo. For example, we have the photographer of the seeds here, taking the photos of the seed. This one is a hairy one. This is called Hibiscus mutabilis. It's a hairy one. Actually, with the hair, it can protect the seed, and usually the seed is located in water, so the seeds can be transferred by the water. With the hair, it can help the seed to float in the water and not to sink immediately. It's so funny. And now we hope that all the seeds could have their own ID photo. We would like to show the richness of biodiversity of our country. If we can take the photos for each and every one of the seeds and also the other materials related. And here, many other species, for example, a kind of wild carrot, kind of cousin to what we eat as carrots. When we are in this job, we can see each seed has its own wisdom. Whether it's for the spreading or for the germination, they have their own way. In the end, we will put them in a sealed bottle and then store them in minus 20 degrees Celsius. Where is the place to store them? It's just under our feet. It's on the ground. So first of all, we put them in a bottle that is sealed, and then we put all the bottles containing the seeds in very low temperature, minus 20 degrees Celsius. It's like we will ask the seeds to sleep. One day when we need them, we will wake them up and take them out. We also have other ways to keep the germplasm. We can develop the seedlings of the seeds in the tubes. And also there's a place with a temperature of minus 196 degrees Celsius. In the liquid nitrogen. Anyway, it's different methods and different ways to keep those seeds as long as possible. Today we have discovered a big world hidden inside a small grain of seed with the microscope and also the other equipment. Our Mr. Tsai has also introduced the wisdom of the personnel here to protect the biodiversity of our country. Later on, my colleague will help you to discover where the fantastic beasts are in the mountain area. Dear viewers of CCTV News, my name is Yishan Nan from CCTV News, and welcome to our program. We are now in the southern end of the Gaoligong Mountain, and we are now standing at the feet of the mountain. The whole area of the natural reserve of Gaoligong Mountain is more than 400,000 square meters. So today, please join me in discovering the fantastic beasts. And also, one quick notice to all of you, our program has been delivered after the approval of the local authorities. Today, we have invited a very famous guide and also a very famous ecological photographer, Mr. Zhu Yuan. Please say hi to everyone. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our program. Today, we're about to listen to you, and you can share your personal experience with all of us. Today, when we come to the Gaoligong Mountains, immediately we can hear the chanting of the birds. And we have discovered totally different vegetation, the flora and the fauna here. Could you please share with us why we say this is a kind of hotspot area for biodiversity? Yes, of course. The Gaoligong Mountains, they are located in the Himalayan mountain areas. It's one of the 3 hotspots areas for biodiversity in the whole world. And there is also the vertical altitude here. With the vertical ecosystem, we have the broadleaf forests and rhododendron forests and the needle-like forests, needle-leaf forests, and some meadows. We also have very accomplished structures of vegetation. We have this biodiversity because we have this very diversified biological environment. We have a huge amount of vegetation, and then we have a huge amount of species of animals. I've made some homework. I know that lowest point of the Gaoligong Mountain would be at an altitude of 200 meters, and the highest point would be 5,000 meters. So the elevation would have a difference of around 5,000 meters. Every time when you go up by 1,000 meters, then the temperature would drop by 6 degrees Celsius. Now we are at an altitude of 1,950 meters, and now I can feel already the temperature has dropped so much in comparison with the city of Tengchong. And then there are meadows, and at this time of the year, very limited food for the birds. In this ecosystem that is vertical, then the birds will do some vertical migration in order to find the food. In other places, the birds would fly from northern part to the southern part of the globe to find food. But here is quite different. The birds will just move from high altitude to a lower altitude to find. There are two types of them. Some of the birds really they come from the northern part of the country, and for some others they will just do some vertical migration from the altitude of more than 3,000 meters to an altitude of more than 2,000. Most of them will arrive at the range of 1,800 meters to 2,300 meters. They will not go as low as the altitude of 900 meters because they don't want a sudden fall of the altitude, sudden change of the altitude. For example, just now we have shown the footage of a green hat bird. When spring comes, they will move back to the high altitude. Some of the birds seen around us, they have accomplished the vertical migration. I have visited the high altitude area from 3,000 to 3,500. At this moment of the year, only few birds would insist living there. Maybe only 10 species of them, because the majority of the birds, they would already be traveling towards the lower altitudes. And I know that here in the Gaoligong Mountains, we have about 400 species of flora and fauna unique to this area. For example, the rhododendron. Only for rhododendron, we have different types of them. And rhododendron is a big family. Every year between March and May, above an altitude of 1,800, you can see the flowers covering the whole slope of the mountains. Because in Tengchong here we have many rainfalls in spring. At this altitude, if you add up 1,000 meters, the whole structure of the vegetation would be changed. And when you reach up to 2,900, the highland rhododendron would be the dominating species. And also you can find some bamboos. And there are many pheasants. They will get up very early in the day, even before the sunrise, and they will set out their journey to find food. Here in the Gaoligong Mountains, we have some representative pheasants. One of them is called the white-tailed rainbow pheasants. They are very few in the quantity, and they are a protected species. Usually they will live in an altitude of 300 meters plus. They are very small groups, and they are very vigilant. So for the bird fans, it's quite difficult for them to capture the white-tailed rainbow pheasants. And it's only here in the Gaoligong Mountains that you can take the photos. You can even discover the trails of the white-tailed rainbow pheasants, really small number of them. Throughout all these years, we would like to see them. And apart from these white-tailed rainbow pheasants, there are also other types of pheasants, like the blood pheasants and the others, many types of them. And here you can see two special plants carrying the plates of explanation. This one belongs to the medium and low altitude. It's called the Simplucus. Usually you can find this one in the Yunnan province, the Guizhou province, and Sichuan province. They prefer dense forests, humid areas, and you can even find it's like the moss or fern on the surface of it. Just a few days ago, there's a friend of mine coming here to take photos of the fern and moss. Because here we have sufficient rainfall, that's why we have all these the thick layers of ferns and moss. Just now you mentioned that here you have sufficient rainfalls, and that explains this huge biodiversity. And because we are now in mountains, so here you have different ecosystem. During the whole day, you can already experience the 4 different seasons. And the rainfall could come any time during the day, and the wind is also the same. Here in Gaoligong Mountain area, you can also find different temperature zones, all 5 different climate zones, from tropical ones to the cold zones. The tropical area, temperate area, subtropical, subtemperate, and the cold areas. You can also hear different types of chantings or different languages used by the birds. Here in the Gaoligong Mountains, even for the section of the Hengduan City, they will take up 1/4 of the whole bird population in the country. So only for the Hengduan County, you can find 37% of the species that you may find in the whole country. This is also one evidence to show that ecosystem is really wonderful here and the wildlife has been very well protected. And I think you must be very familiar with the birds. Could you please share with us some anecdotes or stories? For example, the precious birds. When we say the birds are precious, maybe first of all, they are protected at a very high level, level 1, level 2 protected species. And then they are precious because they are only living in limited areas and they are rarely seen. Usually people would prefer to see the high level of protected species, but for the recorders of the species, they prefer those rarely seen species because that's like a challenge to them. For the whole Gaoligong Mountain area, I have recorded 300 plus species of birds in the whole Hengduan area. I've recorded 503 species. For example, a kind of white bird but with a black head. It has been recorded around 5 times only, and among the 5 times, I made twice of the records. This is one of the rarely seen species. For the animators and for the fans of the birds, they will be crazy about these kind of precious species. And also, just now we talked about white-tailed rainbow pheasants. I've been looking for that for around 5 years, but until now, unluckily, I've never seen it. There's another tree there with the plates of explanation. So previously we talked about the birds Where do they want to live? What is their habitat? Maybe the big trees? It depends, actually. Some of the birds, they prefer to stay on the foot of the tree, some others in the middle section of the trunk, and some others prefer to stay at the crown part of the tree. Because I'm very curious, usually we think the birds would be nestling on top of the trees, but you mentioned there are some birds who prefer to stay at the foot of the trees. For example, some of the birds will just be nestling in the holes here in the ground. Some birds, they will make the nestles at 2 meters or 3 meters above ground. Over there, for example, over there you can see a nestle. Usually the owls, they will also stay at a lower height, but some other birds, they prefer to get higher. In the Gaoligong Mountain areas, the forest birds, they are smaller in size in comparison with the birds living by the water. Except for the pheasants are bigger in body size, but for the other birds, they are smaller. And for the vertical migration, when they move from the higher altitude to a lower altitude, do they change the eating habits? Do they change the preference for food? Maybe they will find different food, but the types of food in their preference would never change significantly. For example, for the birds that have a preference for fruit taking, after moving from a high altitude to a lower one, they will still consume the fruit, maybe different kind of fruit. You have also mentioned here is a rich diversity of the birds. Are there other animals or bees that you would like to share with me? Like the red panda, for example. I've encountered them for many times. And also a kind of langurs. That's a type of monkeys. You can also find the white-browed gibbons. And also the reptiles like the snakes, lizards, frogs, different types of frogs, tree frogs, forest frogs, and also the green snakes. Very toxic. The whole body of that snake is green. And I like frogs better. In their reproduction season, they will make the bubbles and they can make funny sounds. You've mentioned the reptiles. What about the beautiful ones like the butterflies? Have you taken any photos of the butterflies? Yes, indeed. Some days ago, some friends come to Tengchong and they have counted a little bit, more than 200 species of butterflies. For example, this one is the level 2 protected species, and their image has been captured a little bit lower than our altitude here. Every year they have a fixed calendar from the end of September to the end of October. They will appear here. So that is a short window time for you to take the photos of these butterflies. And now at an altitude of 1,700 to 2,000, you can find these butterflies. So that is around the mid-mountain areas. And these butterflies, they're rarely seen and they're very beautiful. This year we have traveled several times here. Finally, we made it. In the beginning, we would like to find the vegetation because it's always that specific vegetation, the plant always comes hand in hand with the butterfly. If you can find a plant, you can have a bigger chance of seeing these butterflies. Maybe that one is the plant. This is the plant that would attract the butterflies. This is one of the favorite plants for different types of butterflies because they will give a special fragrance. Many people coming afar would just stay here around this vegetation for several days in order to wait for the appearance of the butterfly. And many people, they also take a walk here in the mountain areas. Nowadays, we have developed some pathways for Gaoligong Mountains. There are 9 routes developed. Over there, you can also see the waterfalls. It's in the outskirts of the natural reserve, the protected area. For example, we can see the names of the road and the names of the place. It's also a very beautiful place for the tourists. In recent years, outdoor activities have attracted more and more people. People here in the Gaoligong Mountains could run into different species like the flora and fauna, insects, flowers, trees, etc. Today we have visited this mysterious Gaoligong Mountain areas. Previously, I've heard some people say that they would like to make nature surrender. They would like to dominate in nature, but some other people would hold the opposite. They think we people should respect the nature. So what's your take? First of all, I believe that human being is just too insignificant in front of the nature. What we can do in front of nature is to give our protection. Into the mountains have become a hot topic in the internet. Many people have also shared information with others saying that you have really to be careful if you want to walk into the mountains or take a trip. So what's your recommendation? When you want to get close to the nature, you have to know where are your limits. If you are in a new area, you have to hire a guide if it is possible. For example, this morning when we arrived, we have a very foggy area. Later on, the sky has been cleared, and a few moments later, there's the rainfall. So the weather conditions are changing throughout the day. If you come to this area, it's better to have a guide by you. And especially in these mountain areas, some of the parts are not open to the public. Only with the approval of the local authorities can you have the access into these forbidden areas. some people, they would just form small groups, and also with the presence of small kids, and they want to take long walks. This is not a very clever idea. Of course, you can bring your kids here and give them lessons about nature in the field, but you have to know your map first, and also you have to take care of your security. So today, with you as our guides, we have fully enjoyed the beautiful scenery here, and we have gained our knowledge about the biodiversity. People were asking, where are the fantastic beasts? But this whole area of Yunnan province could be considered as a big gene bank. And finally, you've mentioned that it's a good idea to get close to the nature, but you have to be careful and you have to follow the rules. And for our audience, maybe you can make an invitation or you can share with them something more. First of all, I'd like to welcome all of you to this beautiful Gaoligong Mountain area where you can get close to nature, you can gain your knowledge about the mountain and also the species here. But with one precondition is to get yourself secured, protect yourselves, and also plan your route, because security, safety is the first priority. And thank you very much for your explanation today. We've had a wonderful day with you. And for our adventure here in Gaoligong Mountain has touched its end. I really hope that one day we can meet you again in this area.